right, just getting my screen already here. Hopefully I'm sharing the PowerPoint, and can you confirm? All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the WIOA Titles 1 and 4, Coming Together to Serve Youth training today. My name is Alyssa Klein, and I am from Vocational Rehabilitation Services and serve as our statewide coordinator of our services for youth. We are so happy to have you with us for the next hour and a half. Before we begin, Anne, if you wouldn't mind linking one more time the PowerPoint into the chat, I want to make sure everyone has that link. I also want to acknowledge that this session is jam-packed with content, and we acknowledge that, but we wanted to make sure we got you all the real important information today. So keep in mind, you have the PowerPoint, we are recording, we'll send out the recording to everybody. So you can always go back to review information. And lastly, I want to acknowledge that this training actually has been a long time coming. We've been working on it for quite some time. And it was put together and presented by a fabulous group from both Titles 1 and 4 of WIOA. And so we're going to introduce those folks throughout the training. Go here. So this training is being brought to you by the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, as well as the Minnesota Association of Workforce Boards, otherwise known as MOB. So I want to acknowledge the support of some special people that are here with us today. First, we have Corey Schmid. He's a staff member at the DEED Office of Youth Development. His office, with Kay Tracy as the lead there, supports all of the local WIOA Title I partners. So if Corey, I think you are on, if you can just maybe say hi so everyone can see you. And there's Corey.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, if you have any questions about anything on what we run in the Office of Youth Development, feel free to reach out.
Thank you, Corey. And next, we also have Gina Fortney, Director, and Becky Asatura, Project Manager of the Minnesota Association of Workforce Boards, or MOB, as I said earlier. A MOB is the association that represents the cooperative efforts of the 16 local workforce development boards across the state. So Gina and Becky, if you both could say hi too, that'd be wonderful. Oh, you probably can't go off mute. Sorry, I see them both on my screen, so if you could just wave. Sorry about that. We appreciate, again, your support and for being here today. All right, I'll move us to the next slide. So I'm just going to review some of our high-level goals for this training. Again, those that are invited to this training are those that are part of our Title I and Title IV of our WIOA system. Through various state-level discussions, there was an acknowledgement that there's never been a training like this before. So while some of the content might not be new to some of you, we know that there are likely many who could benefit from understanding how our system works and understanding why it is so important for us to be working together. Many of you are already partnering closely together, but our hope is that this can help strengthen that collaboration. We hope that you leave with a better understanding of our respective responsibilities under WIOA, that through this understanding that you'll be better able to collectively identify all resources that support youth and know how to help youth navigate across our WIOA titles. And last but not least, we hope that by understanding all of this information, that we can all emphasize the youth's experience together. So when handoffs happen, they can be warm, that when we work together to serve youth, that the services can be seamless, and that as much as possible, we can let our government-imposed bureaucracies take place behind the scenes as much as possible. And here is our agenda. So we'll start with an overview of our shared system, and then we will get into Title I, or the local workforce development area youth programs. Then we'll go to Title IV, which is Deed, VRS, and SSB. We will close out with moving forward between our collaboration between our two titles, and also have some time for Q&A. All right, so we're gonna just move straight ahead to our first section, which is an overview of our shared system. I'm pleased to introduce you to Nicole Swanson and Chris McVeigh, who will be presenting this portion. And we'll start with Nicole, who will introduce herself, and then I'll let them take it from there.
Hi, everybody. Nicole Swanson, the Director of Anoka County Job Training Center and staff to the Anoka County Board here at the Career Force in Blaine. I am super thrilled to be joining all of you today, and a special thanks to my team locally. We have Bridget Backman and also Darcy Hokanen, along with our VRS partners. So we have been involved deeply with our VRS partners at what used to be the Workforce Center, and then now the Career Force location in Blaine for 30 plus years. And so we are looking forward to continuing to move out of COVID-19 as we focus on transitioning Minnesota and of course our local areas out of COVID-19 into economic success and recovery, and really looking at workforce opportunities for those with individual differences. So thank you for your invite today to be here, and thank you to the Anoka County team, and I'll pass it over to you, Chris, before we get started.
Sounds great. Yes, my name is Chris McVeigh, and I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for DEED VRS, Vocational Rehabilitation Services. I support Alyssa Klein in her many endeavors around pre-employment transition services coordination, as well as transition services. So all services and supports to high school students. And then of course, the many staff that we have at DEED VRS supporting high school students, whether they are pre-employment transition services representatives, rehab reps, or whether they are transition counselors. We are bringing our full resource and support to these students. We know that there have been significant challenges with COVID. We're really excited that for those that are comfortable to go out and meet with students again and really start engaging in the way that we're most comfortable doing that. So again, I'm excited to be here, and I'm really pleased that Nicole Swanson and I have been able to connect and work with our teams to develop this training for you today. Really, it's about taking it to the basics about, you know, who are we and what is our charge, and also how are we related as it relates to WIOA. So again, thanks everyone for joining today. Next slide. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is what brings us here and how we're related. It was signed into law July 22nd of 2014, and it is considered landmark legislation and was designed to strengthen and improve our nation's public workforce system. There's two primary customers, and I can say on the DEED VRS side, we have had this as a strategy and focus for years, is that our first customer is the individuals that we serve and support, our VRS participants. But we also have a very important customer that's also Minnesota employers. We want to, in the youth sector, I mean, as it relates to VRS serves both youth and adults, as does Title I. But as it relates to youth, we want to focus on those with significant barriers to employment. And then in terms of employers, we want to match those employers with the skilled workers that they need to compete in the global economy. So it's really that umbrella of WIOA, where both the titles 1 and 4 have very significant, important responsibilities in serving and supporting youth and adults. So the precursors to WIOA. This began back in 1920 with the Smith-Fess Act. This trajectory just shows you that we have been, as the nation, supporting people with disabilities and people who are in need of help getting to work since 1920, so over 100 years. Starting with the Smith-Fess Act of 1920, Wagner Pizer in 1933. Moving forward I'll just fast forward to the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, as well as the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. 1982 was the Job Training Partnership Act. Some of us may remember JETPA, the acronym for Jobs Training Partnership Act. And then WIOA, the Workforce Investment Act of 1998. So you'll see that, along the way, there have been these legislative initiatives and expectations on state and federally funded public programs to support people in their workforce needs, as well as employers. WIOA really brings our systems together. It reauthorizes the nation's 6 core workforce training programs. It aligns the workforce programs through a state unified plan and common performance measures across all programs. For the VRS and SSB folks, MSGs, the measurable skills gains, as well as those credentials, is something that, again, those common performance measures don't just live in 1 or 2 of the titles, they live across titles. So that's really a significant change for us. And then a structured system that includes the state and local boards and one-stop centers, otherwise known as in Minnesota, the career force. Please note that there are, as Alyssa said, this presentation is chock full of resources, and there are links to both our state unified plan as well as those common performance measures across all programs. Next slide. So I'm handing, I think, to Nicole.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Sure.
So we're thrilled to really reconnect everybody. I think this is an opportunity for all of us to kind of kick off or re-kick off our services as we really launch into COVID recovery. And these last 2 years have been significant in so many ways. And you'll hear some great stories today about partnerships and working together. And we've seen some extreme successes with individuals with disabilities or individuals with differences, and how they have found success, much success in work and employment and training. So I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but again, like Chris and Alyssa said, there's a lot of information. And so we just want to recap the structure of our work. And as we've talked about, we have Title I and Title IV on today's call, but WIOA really highlights Title II, which also includes adult education and literacy, along with Title III partners of job service. And collectively, it really takes us from WIA into WIOA, and we've been in this space since 2014, and it is all about collaboration and working together. And certainly, we've seen a lot of different pivots since COVID has affected all of us. And again, job seekers and businesses are our customers. Next slide, please. The workforce development system is incorporated into 6 regional workforce development areas, but specifically 16 workforce development areas and boards. And all of you, the managers and teams, should all know your respective teams in those areas. And I'll speak from the metro area. We are considered Region 4. And for Anoka County, we are Workforce Development Area 12. And so we do have a local workforce development board, which includes all of the previous partners highlighted on the previous slide. But specifically with VRS, we do have all of the local managers, regional area managers, included in those workforce development boards. So in Anoka County, that includes Becky Johnson, who attends those meetings regularly, receives the board packets, and is a part of all the discussions. And the hope is that everybody that attends those meetings, and again, specifically, majority of all boards are businesses representing all different industries, whether it's construction, long-term care, hospital care, manufacturing, a variety of entities. And it's meant that they bring that information back to their networks and it is shared from there, along with providing input specifically into the services. And for Anoka County, that would include the services that we provide as a Title I provider for our programs, but also for our career force location, along with our partnership. And in Blaine, that includes about 20 different organizations that are in our building, but in our partnership, there's close to 30. Next slide, please. So some oversight, and Chris had mentioned this in that long history. So we work with our federal partners at the Department of Labor, and then it comes down to the state with DEED, which includes Title I and Title III, but also our economic development partners are very, very important in the work that we do. And then locally, all of that oversight goes to the local workforce development areas and the boards to provide insight, to develop programs, to provide local input to really meet the local needs, but also the regional needs as well. And local boards are all a little bit different as far as how often they meet. But again, it's really meant to be transparent, to provide opportunities for the community to be involved with those discussions, but also then connect services to those that we serve. And for Anoka County, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our local employers, as well as our regional and state employers, but also working closely with our local school districts, along with other local initiatives. Next slide, please. And I've talked a little bit about this, but the charge of the local workforce development boards is just that, to provide input and direction. WIOA is the highest level, if you would, of performance requirements and partnering outlines. It's the smallest pot of our money, but because of those highest standards, it really is the framework that all of us use for our work. And you can see the membership on our boards. Maybe Gina, you could put in the chat the link to the website for the Minnesota Association of Workforce Boards. And on that previous map that I showed, if you hover over that, there's links and you can click on it to get local partnerships as far as who's involved in the different boards, what industries they represent, along with looking at our local plans as well that we work with our partners. And our local partnerships always have included VRS and also state services for the blinds. In staffing, each local workforce development area has a director, and I happen to be the director of the Anoka County Workforce Development System. And I am staff to the board. So I work collectively with our Board of Commissioners and also our Workforce Development Board in really bringing information forward about our programs. So for example, in Anoka County, we were one of the pilot sites for the PREEDS program. And I feel like that was just changed in legislation not too long ago. It was still called the PREEDS pilot. But for example, when we looked at that opportunity, the staff worked along with Becky Johnson and her team, and then collectively presented that to the Workforce Development Board to get their input, to get their questions, but also to provide feedback along with the successes that we have and get their input as far as, making changes to the program. So that's really the intent. Next slide. So some of the duties is certainly to convene workforce system partners over and above required partners in the different titles, but we also have community-based organizations. We also have trades and labor. We have Minnesota state partners and other training entities. So a variety of stakeholders and individuals providing that input, establishing policies, really looking at making sure that we're meeting the needs of the public that we're serving, that we're maintaining budgets that are on point and performance standards that really are required for all of our programs, creating an employer services plan. So locally in Anoka County, we have a workforce development specialist. Previously, job service used to employ business service reps. And so all of the regions have business service reps, but in the metro area, for example, there's one. That's just not enough to serve all of the employers. And so we have to work collectively. And I think that's one opportunity that working in PREEDS and with vocational rehabilitation services, locally, we can really look at what the needs are, because we don't want to duplicate services. We want to integrate services and really launch our work. And collectively, how can we do that? Looking at career force locations and other service delivery areas. Chris, you had mentioned going into the schools. And we really want to make sure that teams, all of you, have clear communications on what services are available at career force locations, because we really want, and specifically I'll speak to Anoka County, we cannot be everywhere. We don't have the funding to be everywhere. So customers that need to really have those in-person services, and we do know that people, specifically businesses, are asking for in-person services. And as we move back into economic recovery, Chris, you had mentioned people feeling comfortable. At some point, how do we move forward with economic recovery and working together with individuals to meet their needs? And in Anoka County, that would be at the career force in Plain. And a variety of other things too that we might have that are local events. Like we have a on-site hiring events. We have an extended partnership with PCs for People. We have an on-site food shelf. So there's a variety of different services at different locations, along with challenges that different locations might have as well. Next slide. And this just highlights a little bit more of the specific information. These are hyperlinks. So if you highlight them, you can see more specific information related to the workforce development boards in the areas. And I think that concludes my piece. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I just wanted to provide some backdrop about how the VR, the Public Vocational Rehabilitation Program, both VRS and SSB, the oversight and the funding and how that flows. So with our Title I partner, it's Department of Labor. With VRS and SSB, it's the U.S. Department of Education. That is our federal entity that provides the oversight. And that information, those regulations, the feedback, the opportunities to share information, the occasional times where they come in and they monitor us, that all comes from the Rehabilitation Services Administration, which is under and in the Department of Education. Unlike our Title I partners, that federal information flows into us as a state agency or organization. And as an administrative entity, VRS and SSB, we can have direct connection to VRS teams across the state. This has really been a great learning for me in learning from the Title I partners about it's not just what flows from DOL, it's also that connection to the workforce development boards, county commissioners and others that has that influence and that, essentially sometimes those marching orders. Again, with VRS and SSB, it all flows from the U.S. Department of Education to DEED and then administered by the VRS and SSB organizations. VRS has 22 teams, 48 offices, and many at many locations, career force centers across the state. SSB has 12 offices, and many of them are located in career force locations as well. So this slide, we have again some links, just like Nicole had with, where are those local workforce boards and Title I partners located. In this particular slide, we have a VRS field staff directory. It is accessible. The VRS student career services staff. So if you want to find which counselor or pre-ETS rep is connected to which high school, that's also available here. We have an administrative staff directory. So people like myself, Dee Torgerson, the regional directors from across the state are also there. And then also the RAMS directory. So the rehabilitation area managers, there's a directory that you can click on that link as well. And the map just shows you where we're located. For the last couple of years of COVID, we've been working remotely. Now, like I said, back a week and a half ago, Commissioner Grove giving us the ability to start moving back into in-person services and into offices. And so that is being directed and supported at that team level. And so we'll see more and more of all of us kind of returning to this new normal, which is probably a hybrid between in-person and remote services. So thank you so much. And I think I'm handing, I'm handing off to Sheila. Thank you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Sheila Koenig, the transition coordinator at Minnesota State Services for the Blind. As Chris mentioned, we have offices throughout the state. Our main office is in St. Paul, but we welcome you to please reach out, click on the link shown in the slide, and connect with whichever office is closest to you.
All right, we're moving on to Title I and LWDA youth programs. We have Bridget and Darcy presenting next.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bridget Backman. I work with Anoka County under Nicole Swanson's direction, and I have my colleague here, Darcy Hokanen, who is our program planner extraordinaire. And so we'll both trade off talking about the different slides. So we're going to talk about the Title I program for youth. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So all the local workforce development areas typically administer the Title I youth program as well as the Minnesota youth program. Corey, you might have to correct some of my information if I get any of this wrong, but for the most part, they don't just administer those two programs, one being the federal program, the Title I, and one being a state program, the Minnesota youth program. They may also administer other programs for youth that they competitively compete for, such as the Youth at Work grants that are put out by DEED and Minnesota Youth Build, other programs like the TANF Innovation Project or TANF Innovation Funds. Some local areas might have other grants that support training or other activities, such as the Pathways to Prosperity grant. And at any number of times, there can be other special initiatives that the youth programs are involved in. So as you've heard, these are complex programs with many kind of rules and regulations and considerations before we engage with the youth. So really, I think today's topic is around, trying to be mindful of that and be aware so that when we're working with youth, either before, during, or after, maybe they're working with another agency, that we're just mindful that there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So for the most part, the WIOA program, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, really is looking at two main big building blocks for youth, one being education and the second one being employment or employment readiness. And so we really want to assist youth who may have one or more barriers to completing education and or finding their next education beyond high school. We really want individuals who are in school to obtain their high school equivalency or high school diploma, or to test out using a test such as the GED or other opportunities. And then we really want to prepare people for something beyond high school in terms of education. All the research suggests that a high school education is not enough anymore, and that we really need individuals to have an in-demand skill set. And so we really want to assist them in obtain those credentials and or secure employment that has opportunities for growth for them. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The activities that we can provide through the federal and state programs include career exploration. And a lot of our counselors are very seasoned in working with youth and understand the complexities of those developing brains and just the nuances of working with a young audience. We really can provide that support for their educational attainment or educational retention, if you will. We want youth to stay in school, they're in school, and we really want youth that maybe have stepped away from educational opportunities to re-engage so that they have those marketable skills for the employers in our areas, in our state, and or that we just know are going to provide them with career pathway opportunities. We don't want to set them down a path that they are not able to continue to build on. One of the things that's unique about the WIOA programs is that we are required to use the educational and training provider list for approved training providers. So our training has its own set of rules. We can't just approve any training. It needs to be training that's vetted by not only the provider, but the actual coursework, certificate, diploma, or degree. And so we're really using evidence and using data to make decisions. Every decision we make where we spend $1, we have to have backed up and validated. we really look at labor market information, and we're thankful for our partners at Deed that provide a lot of that good information. I know in our area, we have Tim O'Neill, who is excellent about giving us updates on labor market information. And we've heard from different labor market analysts from around the state as well. So, but that gets us those good jobs on that career pathway. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the WIOA Youth Program really targets two audiences. The top program, or the top audience, being those youth that are out of school and or not attending school, I guess is another way to say it. So they're in the ages of 16 to 24. And the WIOA Youth Program will allow someone to be eligible up until their 25th birthday. And a lot of people ask about, well, doesn't the WIOA Adult Program start at age 18? And yes, it does. Someone is eligible for the WIOA Adult Program and or the WIOA Dislocated Worker Program at age 18. So we really do scrutinize applications at our location, as well as I'm sure everyone else does, to say, is this person best served in the youth program or in the adult program, when they may have similar eligibility criteria. And so, but we're with the youth, we really want to make sure that they are really focused on those two big components, education and employment. And we look at where they left off. Did they graduate from high school? If not, we really want them to re-engage in that process. And or if they did complete high school, have they been working, or have they been successful in finding opportunities that are going to help them be self-sufficient? So that is about 75% of our funding right there, that out of school audience. However, we can also help in-school youth, and we work with in-school youth that are attending schools in our local area. Ages typically are a little lower on that one, 14 to 21 years of age. And the youth have to be eligible, and one of the levels of eligibility is the income, and or other barriers that are preventing them from being successful on their own, and or they're managing that piece of their lives as well. So. Okay, going on, we can go to the next slide. So again, this is where I was just saying, and then I'm going to pull Darcy in here to the conversation as well, but our out-of-school youth has a federal requirement that 75% of our funds that are allocated to our states and our local areas need to be focused on serving out-of-school youth. And so again, that's that older youth and that individual that maybe is not on the path to self-sufficiency. So sorry, you guys. Phone's ringing here. The other piece of this is work experience. Work experience is an activity that's very popular in both our in-school and out-of-school youth participants. We have to funnel or spend not less than 20% of our funds on paid work experiences. So this is where we're getting the individuals out into local businesses or local community-based organizations or nonprofits, and we're actually helping them to develop skills, work readiness skills, and or actual occupational skills through a paid work experience. Sometimes it's through an unpaid work experience, depending on the situation. But we prefer to spend those work experience dollars when we can and help the youth start to develop some financial literacy skills as well. So these are important components of the out-of-school program, and especially the WIOA. Okay, next slide.
All right. As Bridget's been talking about all the different services that we have, you know, I know majority of you on this call are from VRS, and the thing to really hear is that a lot of the services you provide, we also provide. And that's the part that I think is most confusing to parents and to youth. How do we choose? How do we know which agency to go with? Why would we choose one over the other? And this is what, you know, WIOA really challenged us all to do, is that we work together and figure out who is best at which part, or not even who's best, but who can best serve this particular individual for this piece. So oftentimes you'll find us co-enrolling youth where we're both working with them. We as a Title I provider are working with the exact same student that maybe a VRS counselor is working with. It's important, as I'm going to talk here about some of our other grants, just that you have an understanding of some of the things that we can provide. I remember hearing one VRS counselor years ago, they didn't understand that we did this, and they were telling people, oh, you know, you're not eligible for us. I'm sorry, there's nothing else, nobody can help you. And that's the piece that I really hope many of you come out of today, is that you hear that these services are available through Title I, that are very similar to your services. We also serve people who have disabilities or different abilities, but beyond that, we can serve other young people who maybe aren't eligible for your services. So sometimes in tandem, we'll work with the same student. Sometimes there'll be students that aren't eligible for yours that are eligible for our programming. So one of our largest programs that we're very fortunate to have in Minnesota is the Minnesota Youth Program. This program is one that has fairly the least restrictive of eligibility requirements, if you will, and we serve people who are 14 to 24 as well. And the thing here, just as with most of the things that, as Bridget said, our focuses are things on to do with work experience, finishing high school, and possibly something beyond that. Go ahead and switch to the next slide. For eligibility, the thing that's important for you to understand for those from VRS is to understand that, I apologize that my phone's going off there, that we have similar applications. There isn't a state, the youth state people do not give us a one application that